Casting with Kerry Jones.
My guest this week has what many of us fly fishermen would call a perfect job. A fishery manager and ghillie at Lough Inagh Lodge, County Galway, Connemara. Over the years, we have shared many days afloat together and many nights talking fish in the bars around the west. In this episode, he talks of his love of sea trout and rearing salmon smolts and the many tales of guiding on the loch and the dairy clare butts. Welcome to my chat with Colin Folan.
Ceri.
Hello, Colin. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Been some time, haven't it? I think it was 3 years I was over with you last.
It must be about 3 years, Ceri. Yeah. Don't leave it so long now. The next time, you know.
No. Well, I was hoping to come over this September. Purely, obviously, to do some fishing as well. But there's a few people I wanted to do the podcast with, obviously, including yourself. But because it's lockdown and everything, that put a stop to all that then. So I wasn't able to do it. But hopefully I'll be next year, if the restrictions allow. I'm hoping to spend a couple of months like I did back a few years ago then.
Yeah. Sure. You're an adopted Irishman now, Ceri. You've been here so often. You know what I mean?
That's right.
You have a lot of good friends here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So at the moment, then you're in hibernation, I guess, in Galway.
I am. I'm just finished with the season, and usually what I do now this time of the year is I usually maybe tie flies for a couple of months, but I tied up until about last week, and I just put my fly tying gear away.
So what normally happens then? You spend the whole fishing season then, more or less, living in Inagh, is it?
Yeah, usually what I do is I don't do as much of it now on the Corrib as I used to do, but like I would be out on the Corrib, you know, from mid-February till kind of May,
right.
And you know I'd be bringing people out a lot in March and April for the duck fly and the buzzers and the olives, and then what I do is I would go to Inagh sometime in May to get ready for or even early June to get ready for the season coming ahead.
Yeah.
I suppose it takes maybe 2 or 3 weeks to get the boats in order, and you know, little bits of tidying up you have to do around the place and getting set, get the rods, you know, get all the landing nets done, all the life jackets serviced, make sure you have plenty of wet gear, paint the oars, paint the floorboards, paint the boats, trim a bit of grass, fill in a few potholes, rebuild a few weirs, you know, because the winter wear and tear on the gravel in the spawning streams and stuff, you know. Yeah, I'd be there then, and I always say to people, don't come to Lough Inagh, don't come to Connemara until the solstice, the 21st of June. That's always that's the start of the season in my opinion, always.
Yeah.
Because I've noticed it even when I was a child going out to Connemara with my father to go fishing for sea trout. We'd always noticed that around the 21st of June, you know, you'd always get a break in the weather. Quite often get a new moon there, so there's big tides, and you know, sea trout. We were only interested in sea trout in them days.
Yeah.
Sea trout will run on wet rocks. I know that's a kind of
Extreme.
You know, a phrase people say too often, but they will run on wet rocks, Ceri.
Yeah.
Like I remember there's an old man, Kieran Power. He'd kill me now if I called him an old man. But he used to always tell me about watching the sea trout running when there was little or no water in the river. And he was telling me what they used to do was, and I actually witnessed it about 3 years ago, but he told me this about 20 years ago. They'll swim up to the you know, as far as they can go. I'm talking about, say, below a weir now in a river where there's only a small little trickle of water coming down, and he'll swim up to that small little trickle of water
Yeah.
And he'll turn himself broadside to use his body as a dam for that trickle of water to build up. And then he'll readjust his head and his position, and he'll shoot up the little bit of a stream. I thought he was having me on when he was saying this to me, but I seen it myself about 3 years ago, and I've seen them just flying across gravel, with the backs out of the water. When they want to go, they'll go. There's no problem.
Yeah. With the sea trout fishing over in Wales, really, the best sea trout and the bigger sea trout normally come when the foxgloves come out. The purple foxgloves. It's probably roughly the same time, really. Then
I'd say so. Yeah.
Yeah, Inagh is known for sea trout, isn't it? Probably more than a salmon, even though you've got salmon there. Yeah,
well, traditionally, Inagh was the top sea trout lake in Ireland, and that's a fact. It was the top. Other lakes will have, an abundance one year, and they'll struggle other years and stuff like that. But Inagh was always, at least one of the premier sea trout lakes in Ireland.
Yeah, Screeb was one stage as well, pretty good as well, wasn't it? But that's not the same.
Screeb was fantastic. Costello was fantastic. But the nicest sea trout fishery, the whole lot in Connemara, was Invermore. There's a series of lakes there, Lough Inagh, Correel, Bunnahask. There's a heap of them. Invermore. They were just absolutely super, super, super sea trout lakes. You'd get a good few in it, but they'd be better quality. You'd be getting the kind of 2, 3 and 4 pounders in that place, where in Inagh you'd be getting the 3/4 pounders and a pound fish.
Yeah.
Inagh's always kind of been that way. When it was prolific for sea trout, they were generally smaller as well. There was, I have books and records that go back there, over 100 years, and they were all kind of smallish fish. Incidentally, then about 100 years ago, I think, what was it, about 1906, 1908, 2 English lads, they stayed in a hotel in Recess in Connemara. It's gone now, the hotel. Yeah. And they just fished Inagh and Ballynahinch for a whole year, and they recorded it. And they got a good few large brown trout. I'd say they were getting one every week. Now, you'd have to realise that they'd be probably trolling as well, you see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Inaghs fly only nowadays. And, they were always getting a kind of a 3 or 4 or a 5 or a 6 pound brown trout.
Right.
On a weekly basis, you know what I mean? Now, when I was growing up fishing Inagh in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, you'd never see a decent brown trout, like most of the lakes in, acidic lakes, the granite lakes, the feeding isn't in it, so you don't get big brown trout. But then, since I've been working there, and I suppose this is my 25th year now, working in Lough Inagh, so that's a long time. After about 6 or 7 years of me being there, all of a sudden, we started catching, 10 pound brown trout.
Wow.
Regularly. Do you know what I mean? Like, I got 3 one day. 3 big lads one day. Now, I was after them, you know what I mean?
Why do you think that is then? All of a sudden, they started to show the big trouts.
Well, people were saying they were furlocks, and I knew exactly what they were, and I let them off, you know what I mean, because there was a great bit of romance and mystery about it, and people were spreading rumours that I was putting furlocks in the lake and blah, 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 blah. But the fact of the matter is that they're just sea trout that didn't go back out to sea because the sea lice problem was so bad at sea. They just, when a sea trout smolt or a sea trout kelt gets, covered in sea lice, its immediate reaction is to turn around and head back to fresh water to get rid of the sea lice. Whereas a salmon smolt or a salmon kelt, they don't worry about getting covered in sea lice because they're just fully blinkered and focused on heading to the North Atlantic to go feeding, you see. So unfortunately, a lot of them salmon smolts and salmon kelts will die, 100 miles off the coast from being emaciated with sea lice, where you see the sea trout coming back in covered in sea lice.
Yeah.
So there is actually a small limestone belt going through the Inagh Valley. So there's a lot of sedges on it, there's buzzers on it, there's some mayflies on it, there's types of olives on it. And then you have all the terrestrials. The place is full of grasshoppers and daddy longlegs, moths. And they'll feed on fry as well, so there's plenty of feeding for them in it. Now, to be honest with you, the last 3 or 4 years, we're only seeing maybe, 2 or 3 of them fish being caught a year. Whereas 10 years ago, we'd be catching, 30, 40 of them per year.
Yeah.
My dad got a very big one out there on a black pennel, imagine. And he was £13, 10 ounces. Now,
wow.
That's some brownie to get.
Yeah. And I can imagine they could be mistaken for ferox or like big browns, purely because even if there are sea trouts, they lose that silverness then, do they? Because they're not going to sea. They come back to their natural colours.
But sure, the only reason I know they're sea trout is because I took scale samples of them. I took about 15 scale samples, and I got Paddy Gargan to look at them from the Fishery Board, and all of them, had been at sea at least once. Some of them had been 2 or 3 times at sea.
So what do you think they feed on to get to that size then?
It used to be full of char. It's not anymore. So I presume they've gobbled up all the char.
Yeah.
And they're just
on any fry, I suppose.
They're taking the small fish.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I remember I was fishing with an old Dutch fella one day, about 10 years ago, and all he wanted was a salmon. He didn't care about brown trout. He didn't care about sea trout. All he wanted was salmon.
Yeah.
So he hooked this big fella anyway, and I had a size 6 long shank green Peter on his top dropper.
On the top dropper?
And he hooked on the top dropper. He hooked this thing about 10 pounds, right? No, it was a big brown trout. And he was there, yes, it's a salmon, he says. And all he wanted to do was get the salmon into the boat and get back to the hotel as fast as possible to drink wine to celebrate it, you see.
Yeah.
So when I was putting the fish into the net, he looked at it and he looked at me and he says, it's a trout. And I said, it is. It's the fish of a lifetime. I said, it's the fish of a lifetime. He goes, it's not a salmon, it's a trout. And I says, I know, but it's the fish of a lifetime. Throw him back, he says. Throw him back just like that, So as I was taking the green Peter out of his mouth, there was a brown trout half digested, about 3/4 of a pound, with the tail sticking out of the fish's mouth, Wow. And I said, look at that, Dad, what do you think of that? And he goes, greed.
I don't think he really appreciated what he had, did he?
Not at all, sure. The Europeans, they hold different masters on things. I remember I was asked to bring this fella, he was a friend of my father, up the Corrib to go fishing for trolling for pike.
Yeah.
And he was staying in a hotel in Galway. Andre was his name. Lovely old Swiss man. So I went to meet him the night before in the hotel, and he says, we go to fish for pike on the Corrib tomorrow. And I says, yes. He says, we go trolling. I says, yes. He says, my friend has been in Bog Bay and he has caught many pikes in Bog Bay. Now, as you know and I know, Bog Bay is up in Outrard, and I was keeping my boat in the Commercial Boat Club in Galway City, which is about 20 miles below Bog Bay. You see. So there's no way I'm going. And it was April as well. And as well as that, there was a good few spring salmon hanging around Down Bay and the Narrows, and I was actually getting a few of them, to be honest with you. Yeah. So I said to myself,
too far.
I'll bring him up to Down and I'll tell him it's Bog Bay, you see, because he wouldn't know the difference anyway, you know. So anyway, we're trolling around Down Bay anyway in front of the pier, and he says to me, this is Bog Bay? And I said, yeah, this is Bog Bay. And he goes, my friend said it's full of islands and rocks and stuff. I said, oh, that's down the other end of it. I said, it's too dangerous down there. I said, and the next thing, wallop, the spring salmon about 11 or 12 pounds, took his Toby, right? And he's reeling it in. And again, he gets to the net and he goes, it's not a pike. And I said, no, it's a bar of silver salmon. I says, come on, we get him in quick.
Jeez.
And he was just, so people value fish different ways. Like I value sea trout and I value salmon and I value brown trout, so each to their own. Everyone has their own
That's the great thing about fishing the lochs over there. Like, you know, you don't like over here. You're fishing for brown trout or rainbow trout. Over there, you can get stuck into anything. Some nice sea trout, some grilse, pike, even on the fly. You can have. What I find over in the west, you can have a fish of a lifetime at any moment on the lakes over there.
You can, of course, yeah, on any of the lakes. Like, I'll tell you a good one. I went out for an afternoon there a few years ago on Lough Inagh with a guest, just for a couple of hours. And there was a lovely wave blowing the whole way down the lake. And I said, I can get the road shore now from the top the whole way down. And you wouldn't have to touch the oar, you know, it'll just carry you the whole way down. And as soon as I started casting, like 2 or 3 casts, I got a char. And I said to the guest with me, I says, that's it now. We may as well reel up and go home, I says, because any day you get a char, you never get anything else. There's something wrong with the air pressure or something like that. Like, that's what the old timers used to tell me, because I've grilled them all for information, you know, because when you spend your life fishing a place, like I'm fishing Inagh for over 40 years, like.
Yeah.
They said when you get a char, that's it. But that same drift, which was only about maybe 400 yards, I got the char first. I got a 1.25 pound sea trout, a 1.75 pound brown trout, and a 10.5 pound salmon.
Wow!
So that's good going. That was exceptional. Yeah.
So how did you get into fly fishing to start with?
I suppose when I was about 4 years of age, my father would bring me up the Corrib every Saturday and Sunday, or up on Loch Mask, you know. Early in the year, you'd be trolling brickings, you know, the small minnows, and then coming on the olives, you know. Well, the duck fly, you'd start fly fishing for them. We didn't fish buzzers or anything in them days. We just fished small millermen and black pennels and pupae and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then the olives, and then you'd have the dap and the mayfly, which was always great fun. I suppose the best fun for the mayfly was, you know, going in on the islands, gathering the mayflies. That was very enjoyable.
Yeah.
So that's how I started. I had no say in the matter. I was just brought fishing from the age of 4 every Saturday and every Sunday. And then when I was about 7 or 8, then I wanted to kind of, you know, do all the canals and the rivers and stuff in Galway City and, you know, around the place. I just had a fascination with rivers.
Yeah.
And my mother and father, they enrolled me in swimming classes, and I had to get certificates, you know, that I passed. They wouldn't let me go by myself.
Yeah.
I had a life-saving course done by the age of, I think, 11 years of age. Do you know what I mean? Where I was actually able to dive into the water and save somebody's life and bring them back on shore and stuff. And it consumed me, to be honest with you. Just absolutely consumed me. There was nothing else in my life except fishing for 10 years or so. And then I got very serious. You know, I was fishing all the competitions, as many people do, and that just drives you mad altogether, you know.
Did you have your own boat?
Yeah. Well, what I did was I joined 2 clubs in Galway, the Corrib Club and the Commercial Boat Club, and you could take one of the club boats there. But you see, the lower lake, it's only, well, in them days you'd only fish it up until you know, you wouldn't really get a good mayfly on it. So the better fishing was always up the lake. So we always kept a boat in Birchall, and we always kept a boat in Greenfields. So we used to have 2 boats, one in Birchall, one in Greenfields, and we also had a boat in the Commercial, and then we could use the 2 club boats from the 2 clubs in Galway City.
Yeah.
And we had a boat on Mask as well over at Ferry Bridge.
I know, yeah.
And we had the use of the boat in Cahir, across on the roadside. And we had a boat on Cara up in the top lake in Cara there, up at Abbey. Yeah, we had a lot of boats. Well, you see, my father was in the tackle wholesale business. He was the managing director of a French company called Plateau, and they supplied a lot of stuff in Ireland. He designed fly rods with them, you know, nice parabolic rods.
Right.
They were mostly first people ever to do the flying condom. It was called a stibel, French eels they called them. Then the flying condom came after the French eels, but Plateau had the original flying condom. I know that for a fact because I had it before anyone knew what a flying condom was.
Yeah.
And getting plenty of fish in it. I didn't know to throw it upstream. I was throwing it across in the salmon weir in Galway, getting a fair few fish, but it's only when you started, when I was taught to throw it upstream that it really was effective then,
So what difference does it make when you're fishing it upstream? The action, is it?
I think...
Because you're fishing deeper, no doubt.
It's not fishing deeper, you see, because you're controlling it with the rod the whole time. You're using the tip of the rod. I think it's just the shock, because it's coming downstream towards them like an absolute bullet. Whereas if you're throwing it across, it's just dragging almost like a fly. It's slowed down completely, and they have a lot of time to look at it, and they can just move out of the way. But in fast flowing water, and this thing is charging at them like a laser beam in the water. You know what I mean?
They got to make a decision quick. Yeah,
they do. Yeah, they do. Now, I use that technique as well sometimes with when I'm fly fishing for salmon. If the fish won't, if they're coming up and swirling at you, say on rivers now, and they're not milling it, what I'll do then is I'll go way down below them and I'll start firing sunray shadows and collie dogs, Francis monkeys, all them kind of things. Let them down and strip them down. Strip them upstream.
Right.
People do look at me thinking I'm mad, but you have to be a bit radical if you want to catch salmon, because there's no rhyme or reason to catching salmon. But sure, they're not feeding in fresh water, so why do they open them out to take something? You see, so you have to
entice them to take.
You have to, make them take it. Make them take it.
Yeah. So did he have a tackle shop?
Yeah. So then Plateau pulled out of Ireland. They were downscaling all their business, so we bought all the stock from the warehouse, and then we opened a shop in Galway. It was only about 2 years before the infamous rod licence dispute in Ireland, which I'm not going to go into if you don't mind.
Yeah. 88,
so we only 88, yeah. So we only had, and it also coincided with the collapse of the sea trout in Connemara. So you got a kind of a double whammy.
Yeah.
So we only had the shop for maybe 3 years, and we had to close it then, unfortunately. But,
yeah. And was it him that got you? Sorry, was it him that got you into Inagh then? Was it? Did he have an involvement with Inagh?
No. What happened was when we had the fishing tackle shop, there was a year where we actually had the letting of Lough Inagh, so we controlled the boats on it and the bookings and stuff like that, because the fishery had changed hands once or twice, you see, and it was just kind of in limbo. So, but no, how Inagh came about with me was I started in Ballynahinch. I was the assistant estate manager there. I started in Ballynahinch in 1995, I think. And the manager of Ballynahinch at the time, he's not with us any longer, unfortunately, John O'Connor. He owned Lough Inagh Lodge with his wife, Maura, who still runs it. And I was working on Ballynahinch, but I was staying in Lough Inagh because they knew that I knew Lough Inagh, and there was another young fishery manager there at the time. Again, he's no longer with us, Niall Fingleton, poor lad. But I would give Niall a hand on the Inagh fishery, and I would work on the Ballynahinch fishery. The sea trout made a very, very fantastic recovery around 97, you see.
Right.
What happened was the fish farm that was in the bay back then, in Burtraboy Bay near Roundstone, the sea lice was absolutely atrocious, 87, 88, 89. And then around 90, 91, they fallowed the cages there. 97, 98. They fallowed the cages. They left them fallow when the sea trout smolts and salmon smolts and kelts were going to sea. And the next thing, you'd gone from catching like 20 or 30 sea trout a year on Lough Inagh to 700 sea trout a year. And you have to realise there was only a handful of people fishing it. And what they were doing was, if they went out in the lake and they got 20 sea trout, they'd write 10 in the book. They always wrote down exactly half of what they caught because they were enjoying this little, freedom and stuff, and no other boats there, and they wanted to keep it for themselves, you see. So that's when I suppose I got fully involved in Inagh then when I left Ballynahinch to push Inagh. You were even with me back in them days, because I was getting all the journalists in. That's 20 years ago. Remember, you were with Chris Dawn.
Yeah.
You did an article. Yeah.
Just imagine what it would be like if they kept them fallow for about 2 or 3 years. Wow.
Kerry, they come back in 1 year. They come back in 1 year. Sea trout are the most resilient things ever. Absolutely ever. They're just, if you have a clean bay, you'll have a healthy fishery. They just come back in 1 year. They won't be big, but they will come back. I've seen it. Like I'm banging my head off the wall there now for 25 years there, thinking you're going to have a great run of sea trout, and you don't. And then thinking you're not going to have a good run of sea trout, and the next thing they're crawling up the rod. You know what I mean? You just really can't tell. It would be just brilliant if they were given a chance for 3 years all over Ireland. I would love to see it. It's just shocking what's going on with salmon farming. It's absolutely brutal. It's poison. It has destroyed. It's destroyed everywhere. Every sea trout fishery in Ireland is destroyed because of salmon farms.
Yeah, I think hopefully things are starting to change because the internet and the different platforms of social media is coming more and more to the front, and more people are aware of it. And hopefully, it's a matter of time, things will change.
Well, you see, the thing is, that's all well and good, you see. But the ordinary person doesn't know anything about sea lice or salmon farms. All they think is they see organic on smoked salmon in the supermarket and they go, oh, that must be good, I'll buy that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, the only way that it's going to change, there is only one resolution to the sea lice problem, and that's put the fish farms on land. That is the only solution. There is no other solution.
Well, onto lakes? What do you mean on land?
Put them onto land. Build them in
purpose-built pools,
aircraft carriers, that are no longer in use. They're starting to do it in Japan, Sweden. You know what I mean? That's the future of salmon farming. You won't have many escapes. You'll have very little diseases. They can be monitored. They're not monitored here at all. They can do whatever the hell they want out at sea there. Nothing happens to them. They can build their smokeries in like old aircraft carriers or old factories. They can have processing plants there. It's the only solution. Only solution.
Going on to the salmon, you do get salmon over in Inagh as well, don't you?
No, what happened was, you see, Inagh was always a sea trout fishery, and when I started working for the co-op, there was a hatchery down at the Derry Clare Butts, small fertilisation unit. So we came up with a 5-year enhancement plan with the co-op, and we operated the hatchery for nearly 3 years. And what we would do is we would net the rivers ourselves and get our brood stock from them, and we'd strip them in the hatchery and we'd rear them, and we would bring them to unfed fry is the term we would use. And basically, if we had 200,000 of them there, what we would do is we would release about 150,000 all over the system, just dump them in buckets here, there and everywhere. And then we would keep 50,000. And then what we would do is we would troll Derry Clare Lake with a micro mesh, conical net, and we would collect plankton. And maybe an hour's trolling this net, you'd fill about a pint glass of plankton. And there was a plastic pint glass at the bottom of it. It took about an hour to fill that with plankton.
Wow.
And then we'd get a 5-gallon drum and fill it with water and put the plankton into the 5 gallons of water and put a plank across the trays where the fry were and put a small pinhole in the plastic drum. And it would take roughly about 24 hours to drip the 5 gallons into the tray with the fry in it. So we were feeding them fried plankton. And then what we would do is, when they were of a certain size, we transported them to the fishery hatchery in Cong. Yeah. And they minded because that's a rearing station. We only had a fertilization unit. and they would bring the 50,000 salmon to smolt. And I used to base myself in Cong then, because I'd be working in the hatchery 6 days a week with them, you see, because every single one of them, we tagged coded wire up in their nasal cavity, and we had to clip all their adipose fins. So I clipped 50,000 adipose fins one spring, and then we would bring them back to. We had 3 sites designated. We had one on Lough Inagh, we had one on Ballynahinch Lake, and we had one on Ooridge Lake, which is in the upper Ballynahinch fishery. And we would put a big cage out there and hold the salmon in the cage until they smoltified, until they started to get a bit of fungus on them. That means then you just drop the net, because they're wanting to get to salt water. They're changing from a saltwater fish to a freshwater fish. And in that smoltification process, that's where they take the imprint of where they return to. It's not where they spawned, because we also introduced carob fish into Inagh, and we mixed carob fish with Ballynahinch fish.
So we salmon,
had three different strains of fish, because the Ballynahinch fish, they average about 7 pound the grills, so they were too big. They were just fodder for the drift nets at sea. So we wanted to follow the example like what Delphi had done, introducing a smaller strain of salmon in, so they could get through the drift nets. And we opted for carob fish, because they're all around 4 pound, and they're proven returners. They're a fantastic strain of salmon. So we mixed. We had 3 strains, as I said. So we had Ballynahinch, carob, and carob. They were the 3 strains of fish we put in, and each strain had a certain code, and each pen that they were in the 3 lakes had a certain code. So we were able to tell exactly when we'd retrieved the code the following year after we caught them, what fish they were and from what cage they came from and stuff like that. So we just did that for about 2 years, and 3 years. It was just the run of salmon that came in. Like, I was working in Ballynahinch at the time, and say 96, I think we had 216 salmon caught out of the castle for the year, and I think 95 there was only around 20. Wow. And 94, 93, 92 it was all the same, 20, 30 fish. I was looking at maybe about 15 salmon a year, and then from once we got the co-op going in the hatchery, it averaged about 60 a year then, you see. So it really exploded, to be honest with you. When they took the drift nets off in 2008, we went from kind of like 40 or 50 fish up to 80 fish. And then in 2009, I think we had 100 fish. And then 2010, we had 130. So like the pulling of the drift nets off the sea made an immediate impact, for the good. It was great.
Yeah. Is it the same with Inagh? The bigger fish will come first in the spring, and then come June, then the grouse come in.
No, Inagh wouldn't be like that at all. We don't have a spring run of fish. We're grills. We're all summer fish. You'll get the odd fish there in maybe March or April, and I mean the odd one, Ceri. Now there's very, 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 very few of them. But our spring fish tend to come in May. And again, when I say spring fish, I'm talking about 2C winter fish,
Yeah.
They'll come in June, they'll come in July. It's not uncommon to see 15 or 20 pounders, bars of silver coming in July. I've hooked plenty of them.
Really? In Inagh? That size?
Yeah.
How big is the one you had? The picture I mean? The thumbnail I'm using for this podcast.
Oh yeah, he was around 10 or so. Was that on the lake?
Yeah.
It was around 10, I think. Yeah.
Dark fish, wasn't it? It looked very similar to a brown.
Yeah.
So he'd been in for a couple of months, probably.
Yeah, there was a lovely wave on the lake that day. I tell you something. I remember that day now very well. I was fishing with a guest, an Englishman, on the morning, and he'd been fishing with me for a couple of years, and he never really caught anything, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But if he could improve his casting or even tying on his knots, that was a great day for him. And he never wanted any fish. But that day in particular, I'm telling you now, this fella was a kind of a...
Just happy
if everybody was like him now, if everybody was like him, Ceri, it'd be a very easy job. So anyway, on that morning particularly, I remember it well. I don't know what I got. I got a lot, but I know what he got. On one big long drift the whole way down the lake, from the river mouth all the way down to the back of Deer Island.
All right.
He got 3 sea trout, and he got a lovely brown trout as well, right?
Yeah.
And I was absolutely delighted for him. And that was about 12:30 in the day. And I said to him, we'll do that drift again. And he says, no, he says, I have to go in. He says, I have to bring the wife to Connemara Abbey, the gardens.
Yeah.
And I says, Neil, you can't do that. I says, because this lake is live now today. I says, let her bring her up tomorrow. I says, don't mind that. I says, we'll stay out. And he says, no. He says, this is my second day fishing now on a holiday. And I promise she's in the hotel waiting for me. So I says, all right, to hell with you. I says, so I brought him back anyway. And I went into the hotel. And I didn't want to go up by myself because I know when it's going to be a fantastic day, you need to share it with somebody.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean.
Having a fire. And you know what I mean? It's nice, and especially if it's someone that,
could appreciate it.
Yeah, and maybe somebody who mightn't have caught a lot of fish. So there was a young lad in the hotel, Maura's daughter. He was Dara. He works in the hotel, and he was about 17 or 18 at the time. And I went into him and I says, "Come on out." And he says, "No," he says, I have to work on the laundry today." And I said to Maura, I says, can I take him out in the lake for the day? I says, for the afternoon. I says, because he doesn't want to miss this. So that's what happened.
Wow.
And incidentally, we're coming down the back of Deer Island, and I said to Dara, I says, no, we were getting a lot of sea trout, to be honest with you. I said to him, see that big rock there? I says, throw the flies right down on the right-hand side of that big rock. As he cast, he wasn't too experienced in casting at the time. A gust of wind caught him, and it threw the flies out 20 foot away from where I asked him to throw it. So I flicked the flies down on top of the rock, and sure, your man came up and took me then. That fella, you see,
So you poached his fish then?
I did. But there's no choice, there was only one cast there. So, and that was that fish. He was a cracker.
It's a 10-pounder.
Mm.
And what did he take?
Yeah, Cape McLaren Dabbler.
Wow.
Or Muddler. Cape Muddler. It's one of the best flies on...
I can imagine what that fella was saying to his wife when he found out, when he came back from the gardens to see that you've had that fish. Do
you know something? I didn't, obviously I put the fish back. I put almost all my salmon back. I might keep maybe 2 in a year. And I fish a lot of different rivers, and lakes. I fish Lough Beltra, I fish the Earth. Obviously I fish all over Connemara. I might try and get to the Blackwater once or twice a year. So I'd be salmon fishing a lot. I fish the Weir in Galway. I fish the Ridge Pool. I fish everywhere for salmon, but I don't put them back. But that day when your man came in, I didn't tell him I got one. You see, I didn't want to rub it in. I didn't write it into. I didn't write it in the record book till after he left. You see, because you, as a fishery manager and a guide, you don't really want to, rub somebody's nose in it if they don't get a fish or something like that, because they're paying you for your expertise and your knowledge. So you don't have to be, you know what I mean. You just try and be modest and
when you're taking people out, you're really willing them. You want them to catch fish. The pressure is on, isn't it?
No, you don't necessarily want them to catch fish. You want them to have a good day. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And 1 in 10 days, you're going to hit it right if you're lucky. You know what I mean? So, and when you hit it right, then you make the most of it.
I remember there was a time when I was over there. I think it was something like about 2012, 2013. You gave me a call and you said, was I available to guide this young lad for the day on the Derry Butts?
That's right, yeah.
Derry Clare.
That's right.
And I was taking people out in the Corrib, and I get the pressure. My stomach, I want them to catch a fish, But anyway, I wanted this boy to catch a fish more than any other, because the story was he just lost his dog that day or the day before.
I remember that. Yeah.
Do you remember? And then his father said, just make sure.
That day, Ceri.
Yeah, it was the same day, wasn't it?
It was the same day. It was a Labrador. Yeah.
And his head was in the shed, obviously, and he was upset. And his father said, "Look, make sure he has a nice day, and if he catches something, it'll be a bonus." And I was willing him. I took
you did
him,
it well.
Yeah, and I remember I said, "Right, go on your knees now," and he was on his knees on the butts there, and he was like creeping along, short lining, only probably about 20 foot, if that, along this little channel. And then I was, honest to God, right, it was like some psyche. I was holding a rod in my head, and I was telling him exactly what to do.
Gee.
And he was bang on, right? He was like, whatever I was telling him, he was switched on. Next thing is
Ceri, you were using an old Jedi mind trick on him, were you?
But the joy in his face, right? The line went, he struck. He'd never had a salmon before, right? And I was surprised, to be honest, that it did come off, And then he stood up then. It was the reel was screaming, right? And like the line is whizzing off the reel. And he was shaking. You could see him. His whole body was shaking. And then he ran back and forth about 2 or 3 times. And I didn't touch the rod. I let him do everything himself. And then he brought it in, and he had the fish. I think it was 7, 8 pounds, something like that. And
it was a good fish. I remember. Yeah,
he was over the moon. I think at least for that moment, he forgot about his dog.
Yeah,
but, he made his day.
No, that was special. Like any time you can get a young boy or a young girl a fish, it's special. Like I've kind of organised a few like competitions and stuff, for kids and their dads and their granddads and stuff on Inagh. I suppose anyone that's in a position like I'm in, it's our duty to try and get children into fishing, because like when you were growing up, when I was growing up, all our friends fished. That's not the case anymore. There's very little children taking up fishing. So, I have an obligation to try and get, youngsters into fishing. Just give them the rods, give them reels, give them lines, give them flies. Just give it to the kids. Give it to the kids. They're the future. Like they're the future. So, and every child, no matter what age, and no matter what sex they are, it doesn't matter. They all have that natural instinct to catch a fish.
Yeah.
Now, what happens when the fish is on is a different story. Some of them panic, and some of them think they're hurting the fish and stuff like that, and some of them get scared. But that instinct is there in every human being at a young age to catch a fish. And to see the delight on their face. Like every time that I'm on the lake, you might have 1 or 2 kids, and you'll have a parent with them, obviously. And what I always do then at the end of the day, first of all, as soon as they start getting bored, take them in off the lake. That's what I do. I just say to the parents, I say, we'll go now. They've had enough. There's no, don't keep them out there, because if they're not catching fish, it's kind of like, playing football without a ball. You know what I mean? What's the point?
Yeah.
So then what you do is teach them how to drive the engine and let them drive the boat back, and to see the look on their face when they're going full steam in the boat. It's just, it's fear and excitement at the same time.
Yeah.
And that really makes the day for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll tell you a fun.
Yeah, go on.
I'll tell you a funny story here, and I'm just thinking about it. A young lad, Aidan Guinness is his name, and he's one of the Guinnesses. But when he was born, when he was only about 8 weeks old, he'd been on the riverbank with me, right? So his dad is a very good friend of mine, and we fish together all the time every year. So anyway, to make a long story short, about 2 years ago, he went to, I think he was 18 or 19 years, he went to Eton, the big college in England, you see, right?
Yeah.
And he had to go in to meet the dean in his office, on his first day in the college. And the dean would explain to him what's expected and required of him in the school, you see. So when he was in the office with the dean, he was sitting at the dean's desk, and he kept looking up on the wall behind the dean at the college, you see. And the dean kept saying to him, "Master Guinness," he says, "you'd look me in the eye when I'm talking to you." And he said, "Sorry, sir," and he'd look him in the eye, and then his eyes would wander up to a picture on the wall behind the team again, you see. So this was going on anyway for 10 or 15 minutes, and the dean was roaring and shouting at him, and young Aidan says, "I'm sorry, sir," he says, "but I can't take my eyes off the photo on the wall behind you where you're holding a salmon with Colin Folan outside Lough Inagh Lodge." Right? He was a customer of mine, so that was it. He was in then, you know.
I bet. I bet you must have fished or ghillied for a few famous people.
Yeah, you would. Kerry Jones was one of them.
Oh, yeah, it's hard to follow him, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wonder what he's famous for,
would. Oh, well, he's famous for a few things. No, you would, yeah.
Well, there was a guy, I can't remember the guy's name now. He's an actor, isn't he? I think it was last year I saw the photograph of you with him. He was the policeman in a film.
Oh, yeah, The Guard.
The Guard,
Brendan
yeah. Did you take him out fishing?
No, he wasn't fishing. He just came down to stay in the hotel for a night to have a sing-song and stuff.
Right.
He wasn't fishing, no, he wasn't. So, actually, what happened was there's that film is called The Guard, and there's a scene in it where he says rabbit in a Galway accent, and I suppose I'd have a Galway accent. And I had 6 Americans for 3 days, and all they kept saying to me every 5 minutes was rabbit, you see, because of the Galway accent. And they left. It was a Saturday. They drove out the gate of the hotel in the minibus, and they turned right. And as they drove out, Brendan Cleeston drove in.
Wow.
So I just looked at him and I says, "You're not going to believe this." I says, "That bus of Americans there," I says, "they have me damned saying rabbit for the last 6 days, for the last 3 days." I says, but like, I'm not going to talk about famous people because it's they're no different than you or I. But you'd get a lot of politicians, actors, musicians, the whole picture of them. None of them really leave an impression on me anyway, to be honest with you. But I tell you one about, no, I don't know, I suppose he's famous, but I called him a feckin' Egypt anyway. And here's what happened was I was ghilliing on Ballynahinch for the first week in July for a fella called Don Carroll. He was Carroll's cigarette. I was Don's ghillie, and always the first 7 days in July was you know, year on, year off. That was always with Don. And sometimes he'd have a guest with him for the week. And this time he had a guest, a fella from Belgium, an outlet from Belgium. So anyway, well, 3 days into the fishing, we were fishing Beat 1 in Ballynahinch, and we were fishing on the far bank. And on the near bank, there's all rushes and reeds. And he hooked a fish about 5 or 6 pound. And the fish kept, you know, trying to run into the rushes on him, you know. And I kept saying to him, I said, don't let him in there. I said, pull him out. And he wasn't stopping the fish at all. And
was it a trout?
The fish went, no, it was a grilled salmon.
Yeah.
The fish went straight into the reeds anyway. I says, "You fucking idiot." I says, "I told you not to let him into the reeds." And sure, the fly, we lost the fly as well, which kind of really annoyed me because I only had the one of it and it was working very well that week. So I had to snap the line anyway and got it back. So I finished up with him on the Friday, and I knew they were going to dinner in Roundstone, into O'Dowd's restaurant in Roundstone. You were actually in there with me one time, weren't you?
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
Chowder.
We had a liquid lunch as well, I think.
Liquid lunch. Do you see how I stopped? We had chowder and... so what happened was... I drove back to Galway after doing 7 days work with them, and I was emptying out my car, and lo and behold, Yamano's fishing bag was in the boot of my car, the Belgian fella.
Yeah.
Like, you want to see all the hardy reels he had, and boxes of fully dressed salmon flies, and this, that, and the other. Like, this was 50 grand worth of stuff now in his bag, like a big bag. So I said to myself, I can't be responsible for shipping this back to Belgium. Like, I hardly even knew his name and stuff. So
you'd forgot it.
Jumped back forgot it. Yeah, it was in my car. I jumped back in the car anyway, and I drove back out to Roundstone, which is about an hour and a half from Galway. And I went into the restaurant and I brought in the bag, and there he was with Don, and there was two other fellas, two kind of big heavies. And I said to myself, right, this makes sense now, because I'd seen them two big fellas, you know, daily for the last week and stuff like that. You know what I mean? They were his bodyguards, right?
Right.
So Don says to me, you'll stay for dinner and you can stay in my house. That's brilliant gesture, what you're after doing there. And I said, well, thank you very much. I'll enjoy that. And he says, no, he says, Colin, I'll formally introduce you to the King of Belgium. He says, right, Albert, the King of Belgium. And I went, oh, hello. How do I refer to you? I says to him, you know, and he says, well, most people will call me Your Majesty. He says, but I loved it when you called me a feckin' Egypt. So I'm not used to being called a feckin' Egypt, he says. Right, so I says, I've just called the King of Belgium a feckin' Egypt. So that was good, yeah.
That's the thing, when you know people are somebody, you act differently towards them, don't you? Just as well you didn't know.
You do, of course.
Yeah.
You see, the thing is, like, working in, say, in Lough Inagh Lodge, and living there, you know, you are living there basically for 6 months of the year. You know, my job, you have to be there 7 days a week, you know, to answer the phone, to deal with customers, to, you know, you just have to be there. People are coming fishing there every day. They don't only come from Mondays to Fridays, so you have to be there. So you get to see the correct way to deal with kind of high profile and famous people. You just make no fuss about them. You treat them the exact same as everybody else. You don't let it out like that somebody is staying there. You know, we have lots of, you know, very famous, you know, Oscar winners, you know, who stay there frequently. And the reason they come back there is because, you know, anonymity, and you just don't say anything to them. Just leave them alone. They're there. It's that place, you know, where people want to come to,
they want to get away.
Just get their head together. Yeah, so you don't encourage any other guests to, you know, come up looking for pictures or autographs or anything like that, you know, because they'll ask you to say, you know, such and such a fella there, would he mind taking a picture with me? And I'd say, well, you know, he doesn't really like that, and you know, just believe it, you know, just don't bother.
It's a lovely place. The house itself is a lovely place. And do you know what? There's something special about the place on one of those wet, misty, horrible days. Just sitting there on one of these, like a Chesterfield, and the whole ambience of the place. And I tell you what's great, looking back on record books, isn't it? I could spend hours just reading.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like all the record books there, we've had to get them rebound because they're used that often, you know. And you'll have people coming in there, you know, like say last year there, no, there was a girl came in there, and the girl, she was, I suppose, in her 40s, and she came looking. Her father had just passed away, and her father used to fish Lough Inagh in the 60s, and she wanted to see was there any mention in any of the old record books, and sure as God we found his name in it, you know. So that's happened a lot of times. You will have people coming looking for their, you know, their ancestors who would fish there, and it's very important to keep them records.
I remember the two big fish over the years over on Corrib. There's a record book in Burke's in Clonbur. So if they have a great day, you have 4 trout, 3 trout on Mask or Corrib, you know, they write their name down. And up to one point, I never wrote in it, but I was always by the bar. It's nice in the evening, just have a pint and just look through the book, and it would make great reading. And then there come a time then, at the back of the book, it says, if anybody catches a trout over 18 pounds, we will give them a pint and a meal on the house, a steak rather, on the house. Yeah. So then when I had the 19 pound trout, I was over the moon. I signed it, put a little bit of a story in, and then, as I said in the back, so I had a pint of Guinness and a steak. And then, so what they did then, they upped it the following day. He changed that then. Anybody who has a fish bigger than 19 pounds will have a steak, a pint of Guinness. So, anyway, the following year, to the day, I did it again with a 24 pound Ferox. And I done exactly the same thing then. And then I had the as filled in the story in the book, and I had another steak and another pint of Guinness. So, but it's nice to look back, and it's always there then on the record, you know. It's nice for somebody in years to come to read it.
It is. But, like, from my point of view, say the record book in Inagh, like, it's very important that everybody, you know, you get them to fill in the book after they've, you know, even if they've only caught 1 3/4 pound sea trout, you know, put them in the book.
Yeah.
Because you have people coming there every day. Like, a couple will come there for lunch, and the wife would be inside in the bar, and the husband would be out looking at the record book to see how it's fishing. And if it looks like it's fishing well, then they'll look for me to try and, you know, book a day or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So
you obviously fly fish. Do people dap on Inagh like they do on the Corrib and the other western lakes?
yeah, absolutely. I can tell you a couple of things about dapping. The first thing I will say to you about dapping is, for anybody that's, you know, a dapper and who's listening, this is information now that you would pay for. Do you know the legs that you can put on hoppers and, you know, daddies or whatever? You know, the knotted pheasant tail. Yeah. Put a big bunch of them on the dapping hook before you put your mayfly on or your grasshopper or whatever. Put about 8 or 9 of them on the hook. Tie them on the underneath part of the hook and have them dragging down. And you'll meet about five times more fish than you will with a normal hook.
That's a good tip, that, no?
Yeah. I fished for a weekend with a friend of mine. We did Corrib, Nask and Cara, the 3 lakes, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We'd have the steaks every day with us. And he said to me, you dap now. He says, we're just going to dap. Because I always fly fish with him, and he wouldn't be too experienced in fly fishing, and he wouldn't be a good caster now, to tell you the truth. But he was an exceptional dapper. And after on the 3rd day, we're having lunch on Mask, and he had 5 lovely trout got on the last drift before lunch, and I only rose 1 or 2. And I said to him, I says, Eugene, I says, how in the name of God have you been out fishing me every session for these 3 days? I says, you know, you're meeting, I think you met 5 times more fish than I did. And he says, go down to the boat there and have a look at my setup. And like, we had the same rods, you know. We're using 14-foot match rods with little centre pin reels in them, you know, pure lightweight coarse fish and stuff.
The same floss and everything,
everything was the exact same. Yeah, the exact same. Sometimes, you know, if there's wind, you don't need floss. You wouldn't put floss on at all, you know.
Yeah.
10 or 12 pound fluorocarbon and just a small size 14 sweet corn hook, you know, the gold hooks. But he had the legs tight. Yeah, I always use them sweet corn hooks. Camazon make them. They're for coarse fishing, you know. They're a lovely little hook. I forget the number on them now, but I tie a lot of small salmon flies on them as well.
Yeah.
You know, little cascades and stuff on these things. They work out very, very cheap, you know, but they're an exceptional sweet corn hooks for coarse fishing. But he had the legs on it. But anyway, I'll tell you a story about dapping with an American woman on the Corrib one year, and I think it was about a 17 or 18 foot, one of them old, horrible, heavy, telescopic dapping rods.
Yeah, glass ones.
Now, massive, big, long thing, about 18 foot. So anyway, it was a big wave, and we're out in the Corrib. I had my dog with me in the boat, and this American one, she's about 50 or so, big blonde one. Very kind of excited kind of a lady. But anyway, she kept missing the trout when they come up. She was pulling the fly away from them, and she was doing this, that and the other. And eventually, anyway, she hooked one on about 10 inches or so, very small trout. And she went berserk. She was roaring and shouting, and she was excited. She was wetting herself. And she just kept reeling and reeling and reeling and reeling. And I was telling her to stop reeling, you see, because the fish was out of the water now at this stage, you see. I said, stop reeling. And she couldn't hear me with all the excitement. And of course, the dog was going bananas in the boat as well, you see. And she reeled the trout up to the top eye of the rod.
No.
You see. 18 foot up in the sky, you see. And she says, what happens now? And I said, I climb up the rod and unhook him. Same thing happened with 4 Germans came to Ballynahinch when I was working there. They came in a camper van, right? And
Yeah.
they wanted to book fish. See, so I suppose they were kind of looked down on, if you want to put it kind of that way, you see. So I just says, to hell with it. I says, I'll take them. I said, so I went over to them. I says, I'll take you for the afternoon. They were actually poaching the river first, and then when they realised they had to pay for it, then they booked a beat. So it was kind of strict in them days. So you could only put 2 on a beat. So I said to them, you're going to have to take 2 beats, and I'll ghillie between the 2 beats. We'll take 2 adjacent beats, and we took beat 6 and beat 7, and I set them up on beat 7, and there's a little bridge, and there's fast flowing water coming out of the eye of the bridge, and I put 1 German there, and I said to him, all you have to do is just throw it 7 or 8 foot in front of you there, and just let it swing around, and just keep doing that. Like, beat 8 is tidal, so the tide was coming, so there would be an opportunity of a fresh fish right at that little spot.
Yeah.
So I set your man up there, and I climbed up onto the bridge, and I looked down, and the next thing, he stuck him on about 6 pound salmon. And he was reeling like mad, you know, and the fish was trying to run, you see, and I was there, take your hand off the fucking reel, let him go. And by the time I got back down off the bridge, he had pulled the fish up on the bank, you know what I mean? He wound him in like 6 or 7 seconds. You know, he just, luckily now I had, I think, 12 or 15 pound breaking strain on. He just horsed the fish in straight away, salmon about 6 pound. Jumped down on top of him and he started punching him to death, you know what I mean? It was the most primitive thing I'd ever seen in my life. There was massive celebrations anyway, and they called the other lads down off the beach, and they said to me, come to the camper van for a drink. And I said, okay. So, geez, they had the best of champagne anyway. So I think we had a bottle of champagne each, 5 bottles.
Wow.
Then we went back down the river again, and the same lad, I switched him up to beat 6, you see, because he was a fairly good caster. And the same lad hooked another one, right? Yeah. And again, the same thing. Now, the fish was about 8 pound. He was a bigger fish. The same thing. He wouldn't let him go. He just tried to reel the fish in straight away. And, of course, after about 15 seconds, he broke him, you know. So he turned around. He had a massive smile on his face. And I says, what have you done? And he goes, the fish was strong, but I was stronger. And he was proud of himself, you know.
No, I remember I lost my very, very first salmon, and it's a gutting feeling. I remember I was fishing in Ballynahinch. I went up for an international, it was on Lough Inagh, and it was on, I think it was like the practice day, or one of the days I didn't go to the lake, and I just fly fished. It's called the Point, just down from the Ridge Pool. And I was fortunate enough, there was a guy there then, Mike Tolan, I think his name was actually. The guy.
Mick Tolan, yeah.
Yeah.
He was the fishery manager,
yeah. Lovely
he was
guy.
Very, very good better, yeah.
And he said,
lovely fella.
Yeah, just fish it, he said, you know, because we were there for the international, it was a big event, and I didn't pay. And he said, I'll have a couple of hours there. Anyway, fly fished it, and didn't have nothing. And then it started getting a little bit tidal, and I could see these salmon coming past me, you know. No, I was fly fishing, and then the guy I was with, he said, I wouldn't waste your time now. He said, you're not going to catch nothing when they run in like this. Just a matter of interest, because the water was getting quite high. I said, can I borrow your spinning rod? And he said, yeah, fire away. So I then grabbed this spinning rod with a blue and silver Toby, and I cast it out, and it was just coming around lovely. I've never spun before. That was the first day I used a spinning rod. Next thing, I got stuck. And then I was trying to pull this Toby out. No, it was stuck. So then I actually tightened up the gears then, you know, so no line could come out. And then I just put the rod down and just walked out, and it pulled out. I thought, brilliant. So anyway, there was no weed on it now, and it just cast out again, forgot. So I didn't address the drags because it was still tight. I cast out then, bang, into this salmon. Oh, he was 15 pound if he was a pound, right? And I was I was in pieces. And this guy that I was with now, Decker, he's passed away now. He ran up to me and he said, "Oh," and he's all excited. And he came to the net. He didn't run or fight, but he was thrashing and thrashing and thrashing. And already in my head, I couldn't wait to go back and show everyone this salmon. And then that's the fatal mistake. Like, he was coming to the net. As soon as the fish saw the net, just went sideways, bolted, crack, gone. The drag was too tight, wasn't it? And do you know what? I threw the rod on the bank. I felt like throwing up. My gut had gone, and it was shaking. And so I've actually lost a big trout like that once as well. And it's a thing which easily done. You're getting snagged, and then you tighten up the drag to pull out, forgetting then that it's still tight, you know. But you learn your lessons.
I suppose I fished with. I've been ghilliing now since I was about 16. I'm 48 years of age, so 32 years of ghilliing constantly. And I've seen hundreds of people lose either A, what you said, their first salmon, or B, you know, a big fish, a big trout or a big salmon or whatever. And about half the times it's human error. You know, the fish would have got a bit slack, or maybe, you know, dogging him a bit when he's on a run or something like that. But about 50% of the time it's pilot error. And you kind of have to...
Makes it worse then.
You kind of have to... It does and it doesn't, Kerry, because you have to explain to people what they did wrong. Because, you know, you can't just butter it up and say, oh, geez, you were unlucky there, you know, sure, you'll get the next one kind of thing. You know, you have to tell them, well, you didn't let him go, and, you know, or you gave him slack line. You know, they're the two main things that, you know, the two main culprits. Which you have to tell the people so they learn.
Yeah.
But the other half of the people where the fish just come off, you know, and like I've lost all the big salmon I've hooked. I've lost them. You know, I've never landed one over 16 pound.
Is it?
I've hooked 20, 25 pound, 30 pound on Inagh, and I've lost them all. You know, so you still remember them big fish that you lose for the rest of your life. You know. You don't necessarily remember the big ones you caught. Now I know you caught a few nice trout in the Corrib. You'll remember them all your life because they're legendary, and their photos and their stories about them and stuff like that. But in general, you don't really remember too many of the big fish you've caught. You know, you really remember the ones you've lost.
Yeah,
there's no question about it.
Yeah, I remember once I was trolling on the Corrib for the Ferox, and I must have gone about 10 days without any real big fish. And then I was coming to an island, Connors, and it was an...
I know it, yeah, up at Kong, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. It's a great spot. It goes deep quite quick.
It's a great spot for the salmon too.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
The salmon go on the inside, whether the big trout are on the outside in the deeper water. So anyway, I was there this one day, and then exactly the same thing happened. I went a little bit too close to Connors, and I got snagged. And so I reeled in, and then I tightened up the drag, pulled out, and I thought, right. And it was round about, 1, 2 o'clock. I thought, my stomach was rumbling now, I'm going to have a bite to eat. So I went around the lee side of the island, now where the salmon run, you see, that sort of bit between
the gravel there.
Yeah. And I moored up there. I had some sandwiches and, I had a coffee, and then I spent about an hour there just relaxing. And then I went back in the boat then, after an hour. I went around to the outside of the island, and I went out wide, so I was coming back onto the point. And as I'm doing that then, I come past the point, and I'm going further out then, sort of about 60, 70 yards out into the lake again. Next thing, the rod on my right-hand side buckled round, right? It was it was bent so much, I thought it was going to break. And obviously, I'd forgot now about the drag, because just before lunch, I tightened the drag. I couldn't get the rod was so bent, I couldn't get the rod out of the holder. And next thing, I was trying to push a little bit more pressure to get the rod out of the holder. Next thing, bang, got snapped, And then, not seeing the fish, I thought was bad enough, right? Next thing, this fish, about 30 yards behind, and at an angle to the boat, leapt. And I haven't seen this too many times. He leapt 3 times, and you could see the roach in his jaw, and he's leaping, shaking this roach, bang, down, leapt again, bang, down. And then he was, I don't know if he was 20, but if he wasn't 20, he wasn't far off, And you know what? I was, my head had gone. My head had totally gone, knowing that fish was hooked good and proper. It's only because of my carelessness, that happened.
Yeah.
And my head had gone so much, right? I just reeled in then the other rod and I went straight in. I had a cottage at the time then. I filled this tumbler I had with whiskey. I'm not a whiskey drinker, right? I knocked this whiskey back and my eyes were filling up. And it was just total mess the rest of the day. And then the following day then, I couldn't face the lake. I phoned Stenaline, booked my ferry, and I came home. It really got to me, But But you learn your lessons the hard way.
You do. You learn your lessons. Like even this year now, I was fishing with. I had 3 guys from the north. The fishing was pretty crap now, to be honest with you. And on the last day, there was a chance of a fish, and they really, really, really wanted a salmon to take home with them. One of them in particular. So basically, the 4 of us were fishing, and I had crossed over the river to try the beach from the far side. I didn't bring any gear with me. I just had my rod with the sunray shadow on it, the tube fly, and I must have hit one of the rocks on my back cast or something, because one of the hooks was bent. I was in a double on it, and one of the hooks, one of them was bent. So I said to myself, "Well, I'd have to walk all the way around now to get another hook, or I can just bend this back, and you're going to be weakening it, And sure, all I did was bend it back, and of course, the next cast, then I hooked one about 7 or 8 pounds, and he was silver. I could see him thrashing around the surface, and the hook broke and came back to me. So that's laziness, and like that happens everyone regularly.
Yeah.
So you don't be lazy. You just, like when you're talking about the drag there, I used to do an awful lot of trolling for salmon on Lough Inagh in early June. I mean, a lot of it now, Ceri, up around the Glen shore there.
Yeah.
And like if I had somebody in the boat with me, I'd only fish at dawn and dusk when you be trolling for salmon. If I had somebody in the boat with me, I'd put out 4 rods. I'd have 2 out the back, 2 small solid glass rods, and I'd have I would troll with double-handed salmon rods, 15 foots, 10, 11 weight rods, with your spinning reels on them and stuff. I just find it, it gets it out a bit further away from the boat. I don't believe in rod holders for the side of the boat. I prefer to put them across the gunnels on the oar pins. But what I do is, when I'm trolling for salmon, I have the drag right up in them, because if you have the drag anywhere loose at all, you won't hook them, because you need that 3 or 4 seconds of solid
setting it
to make sure you hook them. Yeah, so I have the drag right up on them, so it's a kind of it's instilled on me. As soon as the rod goes, I wait for it to go maybe 3 or 4 pulls, and the salmon pull on the big rods. It's a real slow kind of bang, 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 and then I lift, and only then will I loosen the drag a tiny bit. But I tell you now, like people look at me, and when I'm playing salmon, I really don't give them too much line. I get them in, like the cork. The cork would be bent in when I'm playing fish.
Yeah.
But I know the limitations. I've got so many of them. I know when to take my hand off the reel, for example. I just know when I'm pushing it too much.
Yeah.
But I started doing that. I'm not losing as many fish, and I'm definitely not breaking in fish. You see, the thing about playing a big fish is, like, let's just say you have a double or a treble on, right? If you're taking a 2-handy on a big fish, right, the hole is getting bigger where the hook has gone into his mouth, because one way he's going north, and it's pulling that way, and the next thing he's going south, and it's pulling the other way, and the hole is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger the longer you're playing them. So get them in as fast as possible, and you won't have that. Now, I know the big brown trout, you can't really, because they go on unbelievable runs. They can go down deep, and they can come out of the water. They can can do a lot of things. Salmon are fairly predictable. So once they're fairly predictable in what they're going to do, put the butt of the rod into my belly button, and I literally just horsed them in.
Yeah.
But I know when to take my hand off the reel. And from my experience, with kind of, I suppose 12, 13, 14, 15-pound fish, when you hook them, you'll always get a chance very early to get them into the net. There'll always be that one little opportunity within 3 or 4 minutes of hooking the fish. Not always, but especially in fast-flowing rivers. You'll always get that early opportunity. And if you miss it, you're in for another 15 or 20 minutes, which is brilliant for some people. But for me, I like to get them in and get them back in the water as fast as possible, because they're worth more money to me in the water than they are on the bank, you see. So that's the way I look at it. And I'll just tell you another thing about a thing I learned about hooks and losing fish and landing fish and blah, blah, blah. I was fishing the river in Galway, down below the salmon water. It's the kind of, just for the locals, we call it the high bank. And I used to fish it early in the morning and late at night, because I used to like to fish it with the double-handed salmon rod. And during the day, the lads would be spinning it and they'd be fishing the shrimps on it, you see. And if I was to fish the salmon rod down there, the fly rod, I'd be taking up too much water on them, you see. So you could do it with the bubble and fly, because you can control it a lot better. But with the big fly rod, you're taking up too much water on them. So basically, it was race week in Galway, and most of the lads, the locals that would be fishing it, were, they'd be in the pub for the week, backing horses and having a few pints and stuff. So I said to myself, I'd go down. I seen a pool just above O'Brien's Bridge, and I counted 21 fish in it, and they were there now for about 36 hours. So I said to myself, these lads will take now, I says, because nobody's been fishing them, and the same amount of fish was in the pool. You could see them with the glasses. So I came down with the fly rod and I put the flies over them, and nothing happened. And there was a bit of thunder in the air, and I said to myself, I better get home now, I says, because if this thunder and lightning starts, I don't want to be sticking the carbon rod up in the sky. So I was on my way home, and the heavens opened, and I took shelter under a school, and then the thunder and lightning cleared, and I said to myself, do you know something? I said, I'll go back down now, because with the rise in air pressure, I was only about 16 at the time, right? So this was 1980s. So I says, with the rise in air pressure, I says, they might take. So I'm back down anyway, and I was fishing. It's just a kind of a small treble, size 10 or 12 treble, black body, flat silver rib, black and claret hair in the wing. That's all it was. It was like a stoat's tail, but just with a bit of claret hair. I'm back down anyway, and I hooked and lost 7 fish, one after the other.
Yeah.
After about the third fish that I lost, I said to myself, "Jeez," I said, "Is the hook blunt or something?" And I just lost the fish, and I started reeling the line in, and another one took it, and he got off. So I lost 2 on the same actual cast. And I looked at the hook, and the hook was fine. And I went home, and I said to my father, I says, I'm after hooking 7 fish, and I lost them down the high bank there. What do you think was going on? I says to him, and he says, I haven't a clue. He says, ring Kevin Gill. So Kevin Gill is like a fishing guru to my father and I, especially when we were young. If you had any question, you just ask Kevin. Kevin knew everything about what his advice would be. And he said to me, I bet you tied that fly on a triple hook. And I says, I did. He says, tie it on a double and see how you get on. So I tied the fly that night on the double, and I went down for the next few days. I think I got 13 fish out of the pool in maybe 3 days, and I never lost one. I landed them all, and it was on the double. So I rang Kevin back, and I says, I landed 13 fish now in 3 days on the double. Why was that, Kevin? And he says, if you're up on a height and you're fishing down and you're fishing a treble, he said, there's too much leverage there. And like, he can be hooked in the top and he can be hooked in the bottom of the mouth. And when you're pulling from up on high, the roof of his mouth can use the shank of the hook to kind of lever it out.
Yeah.
That's what was happening. He says, but when you have a double on, you're only going to be hooked in the bottom or the top of the mouth. He says you'd only use trebles. He says if you were at the same level, i.e., if you were wading in fast-flowing water or something like that, fishing salmon, that's when you use your trebles. Straight on with them. But up on high, you have to use doubles. And I've proved that even abroad on the Ashley Falls there, up in the Earth on Beat 9, the amount of people that are losing fish up there with trebles. And I say to them, put doubles on, and then they start getting them on the doubles. It's not something you'd really realise, No. It does work.
That's one place I never fished, the Erith.
It's never fished. Ceri, you have to go up there. It's lovely. It's a beautiful river. Now, if you hit it right, you need the water in it. If you get a good flood in it there in July, even going into August, and the water dropping, once it's not coloured and once it's not too high. Max, it's a spectacular river to fish. Spectacular.
There's so much actually I want to talk to you about flies as well. We haven't touched on flies yet. What I'll have to do is next time I'll have to get you to do one of these again with me when I come over next year, hopefully in the spring, and we can go again to that restaurant. Where was that restaurant you went to? Was it an Indian? And on Stephen Barry. Stephen Barry was with us as well, and we had one or two, just a few mojitos.
The Asian tea house, the Buddha bar, yeah.
Yeah, that was something else. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, you missed the Metallica tribute band later on that night. You chickened out.
Oh, there's not my cup of tea. Not quite Christy Moore.
Young Stephen Barry didn't chicken out.
I know. But it started off as a bit of a quiet night. We went to Monroe's, didn't we? And we thought, we go there, move on and somewhere else. But we stayed there for ages. And then we went to this restaurant then. And then we went back.
Sure. Sure. Listen, Ceri, my epitaph on my gravestone is going to read, "Here lies Colin Folan. These things happen."
And do you remember as well, there was a time we it must have been September time, or maybe later October. It was just me and you, and we had a good few pints in many places, Monroe's, and we went to that silent disco as well, which is nuts.
Ceri, will you shut up with that?
And then we went to this pizza shop then, right? And we had this humongous pizza, and we sat by the river now, eating pizza. And then on the way back then, we sat on a wall, and we were singing. And there were people passing, and it was like, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, And I think these people must have thought we were like buskers or something, And they were videoing us. Do you remember that? He was mad.
I don't remember that, but I barely remember it, yeah.
I know. Well,
sure, look, these things happen, Ceri. These things happen.
Yeah, I'll have to remember that one. So, well, just before we wrap this up, again, we'll have to meet up and talk flies, and there's lots more things I want to touch on. Like we've been chatting.
Sure, you could. I could talk for hours on flies because my father was one of the greatest creators of flies. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I could talk for hours.
We'll have a whole episode on your flies and the patterns as well. Yeah. But just to wrap up, there's one question I ask everyone: where would you want to be to make your last cast?
I was thinking about that, and there's two places. I couldn't have one. I could only have them both.
Right.
I'd be greedy. The first one is definitely 100% at the Derry Clare Butts on a summer's night, the last hour of sunlight, with kind of medium to low water, not high water, and no wind. Really, really calm, beautiful sky, and coming dark, because all the salmon come in between the piers to jump up over the fish counter and head up into the river. They don't really go over that counter during the day. They don't like they like it at dusk. So that's the kind of time where, you might get 40 minutes where you could meet, 3 or 4 salmon in 40 minutes, and you probably get 1 or 2, you get 2 anyway. A small little 9-foot rod, 7 weight, 8 or 10 pound breaking strain, floating line, and a size 10 or a size 12 tied on a trout, like a Camazin B175, just an ordinary, like, black and silver. That's all they want, That is just heaven, and for me. And the other part is to be stuck out in the middle of Lough Inagh during the olives, a nice wet day, plenty of rain, and be in some big bay like Ballycurran or Annadown or somewhere like that, and fishing the dries, fishing your size 14 and 16 greenwells and F-flies and stuff in a downpour of rain. That's heaven.
Sounds idyllic.
They're the two. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed our chat, and hopefully, if restrictions allow, we'll have a day or two next year out and perhaps make some more stories.
Absolutely. Sure, look, I'll see you. You'll be back over here as soon as this thing dies down a bit.
Yeah. I will be looking forward to it.
We'll have a day on the car up anyway.
Absolutely. All right, thanks again.
Very welcome, Ceri.
Cheers, Colin.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye.
Okay, all the best. Yaki da.
If this is your first time tuning in, make sure you catch all future episodes by clicking subscribe via the links on my website, castingwithkerryjones.com, or via iTunes or your favourite podcatcher. If you like what you've heard on this episode, feel free to drop me a line via my website. Tell me what you've enjoyed, ask a question, or better yet, tell me what you want to hear more of in the future. And if you're looking for additional tips, tackle reviews, or venue information, or just want to see what's been hit in the back of my net lately, search up Casting with Kerry Jones on Facebook or follow me on Instagram. And if you still want more, I'm regularly uploading video content onto the Casting with Kerry Jones YouTube channel, so just check that out and subscribe over there too. Wherever you follow, subscribe, comment or message, I look forward to catching up soon for a good fishing chat. Well, I think that's all for now, so until next time, tight lines and don't strike too soon.